What is up, indie makers? Welcome to another episode of the Wannabe Entrepreneur. Today, I'm very excited with this one. It's an interview, and it's an interview with Rob Walling, the author of the SaaS Playbook, the book that I've talked a lot about in this podcast. And today, I get into all the details about the book, all the questions that were still remaining in my head. Everything is really, really dense and important episode for any indie maker. Rob is an entrepreneur. He is also an investor. He has invested in almost 200 SaaS companies and micro companies. He's also the founder of MicroConf, a conference around bootstrap companies, and he's all about the bootstrapping world. Very, very interesting. And again, I hope you enjoy it because I've learned so much from Rob, and I hope you will too. So without any further ado, let's get started with today's interview. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Man, since last time we talked, for the interview for the PodSqueeze podcast, Lessons from a Podcaster. And since last time we talked, I read your book, the SaaS Playbook,
great.
And it's amazing.
Thank you.
I was blown away. Congratulations. It's so good. And I tell you why I think it's so good. There's a lot of books in entrepreneurship. There's a lot of technical books. But this one really nails down. It's very actionable. There's a lot of actions, a lot of really concrete information that I can learn. Whereas sometimes they go more to the spirituality or the mindset of an entrepreneur. And you do have like a very short chapter on that. But you talk about metrics, you talk about pricing, you talk about customers, about team. It's like I listened to the audiobook and I discovered as well audiobooks because of that. Since then, I've listened to a bunch of them. But yeah, congrats, man. How did you write that book? Like, where did the inspiration come from? Was it easy? How long did it take? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the compliment. That means a lot to me.
Totally.
Have you ever heard the term hate watching? Like, I'm going to hate watch a show. I don't like it. I'm angry, but I'm going to watch the show anyway to finish it out. Well, I like to say that I hate write some of my books. And the reason I say that is I have 883 books in my Audible account. All right. So I listen to a lot of books. That's how when I say I've read a book, it's usually Audible. So many business books are just terrible. They're what should be a blog post, then a bunch of anecdotes that probably some ghostwriter looked up online or something. You know what I mean? It's like there are books that I read that are hundreds of pages that really should be 20 pages. And so when I write my books, if I'll take any critique, if there's any critique that I will take, is that they're almost too dense and sometimes not filled with enough anecdotes, or not filled with enough stories. So that's why. I mean, I also believe firmly that if I'm going to write a book about SaaS, I should be a SaaS founder, or should have been, or I should have a lot of insight into it through obviously Tiny Seed. I'm invested in it's going to be over 200 companies now here in the next few weeks. So that's, I think, why it feels that way, is because I wasn't stretching for content. I wasn't stretching for ideas. Everything in the book came from either a situation, a question, that a Tiny Seed company's had for me, or that I've seen on Hacker News or Indie Hackers, or been asked on my podcast. You know what I mean? It's all like the topics for the book were not hard to come up with, right? It was exactly what people are facing today. To answer your first question of was it hard to write? It was very painful to write. I hate writing. I like to have written. I hate writing. So it took me about 2 years to write it. I actually wrote the first half in 3 months. And then I got writer's block for about 9 months, and I just couldn't. I had all the topics, I had the whole outline, but I couldn't get anything out of it. So I actually hired a writer, writing coach / writer. And so what I would say is, look, I have this. I need to talk about pricing. I've already talked about pricing to death. I have a talk on it. I have a podcast episode on it. I had all this content. So I'd point her to that. She would then do the first draft of the chapter. It was all my ideas. It was all my thoughts. It was all my structure. So you could say she was a ghostwriter, but when you use that term, people think oh, I didn't write the book. Yeah. But it's all everything in there is mine. It's just, she had to translate it often from audio or video or some other format, oftentimes a talk.
I totally understand, because I'm also an audio person.
Yep.
I don't like writing, but I do like to share, to speak. to have a voice. That's why I started the podcast. But yeah, sometimes it's just easier to write things down, right?
Yeah.
And that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I mean, you have the content out there, and just find someone that is better than you, right? In putting things into words, and do that. And again, yeah, when you talk about being dense, absolutely. I really felt that. I was listening to the book. I was like, wait, I need to listen to this again. Wait, I need
Mm.
especially the metrics chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wait, what is this way to calculate churn? Wait,
Mm.
let me go back. Let me calculate this for my um and now, even then, like, then I told my co-founder, to just like, dude, like, you need to listen to this. We, both of us, we are entrepreneurs, but we never reached to this stage. And it was funny because I told you quickly about what stage we were in, and you just said like, hey, I have this book. It's like our phase with Pod Squeeze matches the target of your
Mm.
book to a T. So I told him to read it or to listen as well. He did, and he was like, "Yeah, let's go back to the pricing chapter, and because we need to increase our prices." And we were discussing about this. Is it really the nice step? And then we remember something you said in the book, which is, if customers are not complaining about the prices, it's probably because the prices are too low.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, no one is complaining about the prices. And
Mm.
we were at first a bit scared because we have a lot of competition, a lot of other websites. And it feels that all of us, which makes sense, try to match the prices, right? Like, we don't want any one of us to have like absolutely ridiculous, more expensive prices. Then I thought, okay, how can we increase our prices? Then I used your strategy of finding out which are our users and really define and see that we came up with this concept that we have three different users, and each user needs a different kind of tier, and some user will pay less, some user will pay more, and based on that we kind of come up with the whole strategy. And we did increase our prices. We increased our prices last week,
Awesome.
and so far, we are still evaluating, but it was all thanks to you. And since then we had a bunch of customers coming with even annual plans with the new pricing, so it's cool. Thank you.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that you took action on stuff in the book, because that's like how each of us has our why of like why you do stuff. Like for me, it's
Mhm.
sharing what I know and then having people act on it is like super invigorating for me, right? That's my loop. That's my feedback loop. That's my dopamine, right? I used to be shipping features, right? It was launching companies. It was shipping features. And these days it's like being able to have high leverage by just saying, here's some things that I've learned. Maybe they're in the podcast. Maybe it's on my YouTube channel. Maybe it's in the book. But when people actually implement it, it like makes a difference in their life or their business.
Mhm.
It like really warms the cockles of my heart,
Yeah.
if you'll excuse the expression. And to be honest, pricing is the biggest lever in SaaS, right? I say that in the book, but like so many people are underpriced, and not everybody. This is not an always raise your prices, but usually if you haven't raised prices since the start, if you took a guess at pricing and you haven't raised them, or it's been a year since you raised prices, most
Mhm.
SaaS founders should be evaluating
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. In the book, you said that we should revisit prices. You gave a big interval, so it's every 6 months to 18 months,
18.
right? Something like
Yeah.
that.
And that depends on the
Um,
space, right? If you're like an
mm,
email service provider, like competing with Drip, MailChimp, Infusionsoft, all these providers, that it's a very, or at least it used to be a tumultuous market, a lot of competition, a lot of new players, a lot of funding. And so pricing's changing all the time. If you're building software for construction firms, and there's a 6 to 12 month sales cycle, and they sign 1, 2, 3 year deals, like pricing
mhm,
there changes a lot less frequently, especially the further you get in. Like when you first launch a product, you take a guess at pricing and you should be adjusting pretty frequently, but the
mhm.
longer the product is around, the more mature the space is, usually the less often you have to
How do
change.
you adjust pricing? How do you know what is good for the business?
Mm.
Do you try to maximize the profitability? Um, what's the reasoning?
I mean, so if we're strictly looking at pricing, usually the thought is, I mean, my basic rules of thumb are like, if you can charge per seat, usually you should charge per seat. If you can charge per subscriber or contact, usually you should charge per subscriber or contact, right? And so these
Mhm,
are what we call value metrics, which are the higher they go, the more value the customer gets from the product, the more they should pay. Not every product has that, but it's a nice luxury if you do. And If you don't have those, then you usually are trying to seek another value metric. It's best to have a number that goes up, and then it increases, which tier someone is on
Right.
based on that. There are some businesses where that is really hard to do, and then you have to do the other side, which is feature gating. So you gate features based on, if they need this premium single sign-on, then you charge more or whatever. Feature gating is less ideal, just for reasons we probably don't have time to go into. I talk about it in the book. To your question of like, how do you maximize it, or the way to think about it? I think there's a few factors that I look at. One, I always want to get an idea of the competition and it's not to be the cheapest one in town, but it is to figure out just what's the landscape of competitive alternatives. And that may be other SaaS providers. That may also be a clipboard with a piece of paper on it, or it may be an Excel spreadsheet, and to think about, okay, how much pain am I reducing? Because I can charge more than a Google Sheet, right? Google Sheet is essentially free for most of us. I can charge more than that, but it has to be within kind of the value that I'm providing to them. If I solve just a simple little problem that they do once a month, well, I can't charge as much as if they're in it every day running their business on it.
And let's say that you are the only one. Let's say that you are OpenAI, right? And now there's a few competitors, but mostly it's the only one in the space, completely revolutionary. Everyone is using them. What's preventing such a company from just increasing their prices? Because there's no one. A lot of people need it. Of course, they cannot run their clients out of business. But yeah, what's preventing them by just because they actually do the opposite, which is very interesting. They actually they introduce new models, and then they reduce the prices.
Right.
Why do you think that's happening?
They have the luxury of how much funding have they raised? Is it 20 billion? They've literally raised
I don't know,
10, 20 billion. It's an insane amount of money. So they have the luxury, much like companies like Uber did in the early days, and Dropbox, and even Amazon. They view it as a winner-take-all market. You and I, as bootstrappers, are not in that game. We don't have the money, and B, most of our markets are not winner-take-all. So the reason OpenAI is keeping the price low is they want everyone to use them such that over time, they become the de facto, the brand, the go-to that everybody uses, and they slurp up most of the market and keep other competitors, because you and I couldn't launch an OpenAI competitor because we don't have the luxury of charging almost nothing for it. So then everybody's using them. Then over time, they increase prices. This is the same thing. Look, Uber's more expensive now, right? Instacart, I don't know if DoorDash, all of those, you'll see their fees are all going up now. And even the cut that they take from their drivers is all going up. What's another example? Dropbox, they're not too bad. What's the other? All the streaming services right now. They're not SaaS Netflix, technically, but right? They're all raising prices now, but they were cheap in the early days. So that's OpenAI is still in that early phase of being cheap to suck up market share, and while the funding is pouring in, and then they'll hit a point where they will absolutely, start to raise prices.
And that's a strategy that, it doesn't, even though it doesn't fully apply to bootstrappers. I believe you also mentioned this in your book, that it might be good if you want to enter in the market, like you did with Drip, that is highly competitive, with a lot of competitors. Is it a strategy to reduce prices so that you can somehow go and steal a few customers from your competition?
Yeah, it is. And here's the thing. There are certain advantages you can have over bigger competitors when there's a lot of competitors. One of them is you can have a really nice user experience, right? Just easy to use software, easy to get onboarded, seamless, frictionless. You and I both know we've used tools where you log into Salesforce and you're like, this is the worst experience ever. And then you log into a certain other CRM. I don't know. It used to be Pipedrive. They're a little clunky now because they got bought by private equity, but Pipedrive used to be really easy to use and feel great. And so you compare those two, and one of them I just want to use more, right? So user experience is one. Pricing is another. Features, functionality, positioning, there's these things that you can use against big competitors. I think if you just go in and you only say I'm going to be cheap, well, it's kind of lazy. I'll say it's like the lazy way to market. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I'll
Mhm.
just give you a discount. It's like, how about we be more creative in this? How about we build a great product and maybe we build some creative features that Salesforce or big incumbents not building, and we make it easier for our customers, and we're a bit cheaper. Maybe it's like 10, 20% cheaper. Maybe it's half the price as long as you have margin. So each of these things give you an inroad into a competitive space.
Right.
They all depend on what's your skill set? Are you capable of building incredibly easy to use software? Some people have it and some people don't. You can learn it, but you may or may not have it at the time. And then is there margin? Is there enough margin there that you can charge less than them for the time being? And what happens is then you build a brand, much like OpenAI is going to build their brand and then raise their prices. That's usually what happens with most SaaS companies is you get enough market share, you get to $1 million in ARR in that range, 1 to 2 million. And then you can raise prices because you now have pricing power. You have a brand and people will stick with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Makes sense. So basically not using low prices as the only shiny feature or reason why customers would like to drop out from there, because most of them won't, right? Because most of them won't just drop out and try something new because it's
just
only
because
it's a bit cheaper. Yeah.
If you're going to go that angle, I mean, you have to be significant. Let's say half the price, or 20% of the price, right? You could, and at that point, it's like, okay, have you done something so different that your cost basis can support that? Because you don't want to, if everyone else charging $100 a month and you want to come in at 20 a month, it's like, that's actually not a great business usually.
Yeah.
Usually you're going to have high
you're
churn.
just going to lose money.
Right. And if people are only switching to you because you're the low price leader, then do you have pricing power? Can you raise it later? Probably not. Like you need something else, to keep people there.
Makes sense. Yeah. One thing that I felt, and I was asking this to my co-founder before because we were playing around with that and said, hey, we should increase prices. And then maybe 1 or 2 days before we actually increased our prices, I was thinking, but like, why do I really want to do this? Is it only to make more money? Because in general, I mean, we are profitable with the current price point. We have customers. They seem to be happy. They are not complaining, which I guess that's a good indicator that I should increase. Why should I, like, isn't it only greed? I don't know. At some point, I was like, am I being greedy? So for someone that is having this thought, what would you say?
Yeah. So first of all, to me, I think most of us start companies to make money. And I don't think that should be the only motivation, because you can take that too far, right? You can say, fuck my customers, fuck my employees, fuck everybody. The bottom line is number one. And I don't believe that. I don't like people. There are people who you and I both know probably who run businesses like that. I don't like that. But I do think that one of the primary motivations should be to make profit. So I don't view price, if I can price my product in a way that provides that fits with the value that my customers are receiving, and they're willing to pay for it, then I don't know. I don't view that as greed. That's the first thing. The second thing is I see 3 main reasons to raise prices. One is you make more money. That's great. The second is usually as you raise prices, if you can go up market, churn is lower. So you will reduce churn. Not always, but that is often.
Tell me more about that. You mentioned that also in the book. It's something that I told my co-founder, dude, we are going to solve our churn problem by increasing prices, and I guess it makes sense. But yeah, tell me
it keeps
why.
out the customers who are more likely to churn are usually pretty price sensitive, and if you keep them out and don't let them sign up in the first place, you can reduce churn. I mean, another way to reduce churn is go to demo only and do demos and ask people like, are you actually going to get onboarded with this? Are you actually going to stick around and use it? And even like help them get onboarded, help them get set up. That's usually going to reduce churn. Now, if you're only charging $10 or $20 a month, you can't afford, that doesn't make sense economically, right, to do. So that's another reason to raise prices, is it gives you an advantage of being able to, I can put more effort into sales,
Yeah.
And then lastly,
churn, sales, marketing.
Churn, sales. Yeah, marketing's the other big one, right? It's like in the book, I list 20 B2B SaaS marketing approaches. And if your annual contract value, meaning what a customer pays you in a year, is like $500, then you can do 5 or 6 of the marketing approaches, right? It's the free stuff. You can launch on Product Hunt and Hacker News. You can do content and SEO if the founder's doing it. Answer questions on Quora. There's just a handful.
Right.
If your annual contract value is say like 10 to 15 times that, so let's say 5,000 to 7,500 a year, you can do like 10 or 12 of the 20 approaches. And if your annual contract value is closer to like 30,000, 35,000 a year, you can do all 20 of them, right? You can run AdWords. You can do AdWords. You can do in-person events. You can do these things that are very expensive where you're actually, flying somewhere to do a booth when your ACV or your lifetime value is high enough. So that's kind of the third reason to think about raising prices, is it allows you more options to market. Were they on Twitter the other day? I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, it was someone on Twitter who charges $10 or $15 a month. And he was trying to run Facebook ads. And he was saying, the numbers aren't working. And I said, yeah, they're not going to. It's like unfortunate, but it just doesn't work at that. Unless you get really, really cheap clicks somewhere, AdWords and Facebook are not going to work at a annual contract value of 120 or even $240. Like you need to add a zero to that before you can think about, in most cases, running ads.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually a question I have and we have, which is when to start running ads. Because we have been trying, we've made a huge mistake at first. We launched Pod Squeeze with the AI wave and trend, and it was growing, and we thought, okay, great, it will never stop because, I don't know, it's our first time having a product growing with this kind of momentum. But then obviously it was just being powered by the AI trend, and because we didn't invest in other organic ways of marketing, we entered a plateau. Because we had less visitors each month, each week we had less visitors. Then we started investing in SEO. We learned a lot about SEO. SEO started kicking in. We learned we are now investing on social media, YouTube, other sources of non-paid advertisement, or at least, you still have to pay to get a team and so on, or you can do it yourself. But we tried a few paid ads, but never really worked. I guess maybe that's the reason, because our average lifetime deal or like annual contract is around 200, 250 or something.
Yeah.
When shall one person start doing ads, paid ads?
So if I had an annual contract, well, first you have to ask yourself, will the numbers even work? And if I don't have an annual contract value of at least, when would I think about this? Probably, well, I would look at my funnel, to be honest, of like, what's my visitor to trial? What's my trial to paid? And then what's my annual contract value? And try to run some loose math just to get an idea. And we can run quick numbers, right? Unique visitor to trial, if you're at 1%, you're doing pretty well with credit card up front, right? And then if your trial to paid credit card up front is 50%, you're probably doing pretty well. So that means that for every 200 unique visitors to your site, you get one new paying customer. Okay, just quick math we're doing on the internet live here. Let's just say that holds. So that's if you're doing SEO or sending people from podcasts or whatever. And it's like, all right, so I want to do ads. My back of the napkin, like 5-second test is to say, so go to Google Keyword Planner and say, what's the cost per click for a term I want to write, right? For a term I want to back. And if I get one customer for every 200 clicks, you can do math. If the clicks are $1 each, then I'm paying $200 for every new customer. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen or anything, but that is at least a ballpark. It's at least a window, of an idea. And so if your average annual contract value is $200 and you have a $200 thing, it's like, ooh, okay, this probably isn't going to work. The other thing to think about, the three main I'll say networks that I see people making it work with SaaS are Google AdWords, Facebook and Instagram, and then Capterra and G2 Crowd, right? Those kind of listings. And each of them you have a different approach to. But if I were to run ads, honestly, I tend to like running ads when I'm trying to validate something. I don't do it to make money, but I do it to learn, right? I also like to run ads when I'm going to do SEO and I run a bunch of Google ads to figure out which of these terms actually converted for me That's what I'm going to SEO now, because SEO takes months, as you know, right? 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months.
So you use that to understand what blog post you should write next?
Yeah.
So how does that work? You write a bunch of titles, or how does it work?
Yeah. So you go to the Google Keyword Planner and you pick out a bunch of terms, or you can hire someone to do this. But if you're bootstrapped, you pick out a bunch of terms, and Google, their AI now will I don't even know if you have to pick out a bunch. You pick out some terms, and then it expands, right? And it kind of, the AI says, ooh, as someone converted to trial or as someone clicked through, it's going to change things to optimize it, right? To get more clicks and more trials, because you give it a goal. Then you can go in and see what actual terms are people clicking and which ones are converting, right? So if there's if there's 50 terms that it's sending to your website and 5 of them happen to be converting at a high rate, then it's like, okay, so now how do I attack those terms with SEO? Now, it may be a blog post, but usually, SEO, it's like, if the term is AI podcast summaries, I'm going to go to Google, I'm going to type that into incognito, and I'm going to type that in, and I'm going to say, what is Google ranking for these? Is it ranking blog posts? Or is it ranking something else? Is it ranking a forum post on this, or is it ranking a tool, or is it ranking a listicle, or is it ranking a whatever? And I'm going to say, okay, so Google thinks a listicle is the best thing, for this term. I'm going to probably put a listicle together.
Okay. So you don't actually do an ad, you just use the keyword planner to kind of figure out.
Oh no, I was saying actually run the ads, because that way you learn with real users.
Where is the ad pointing to if you don't have the?
You point it to your website.
Okay.
And then and whether you have a landing page or a homepage or whatever you're doing, and then you get the numbers from Google of how many people converted to trial, right? How many people clicked through and submitted, because you set a goal up, and that way you have real numbers. This is how I think of ads. Is it's kind of in a 2-step process. The first one is the back of the napkin math of conversions that I talked about earlier, where they're 1 in 200. You can do that in 10 seconds. And then you could run a test in 10 days on Google AdWords of I'm going to actually spend $1,000 or $2,000 on ads just to see. Maybe I'll spend $5,000. it depends on your budget and all that, but that then allows you, which of these actually are sending traffic and which of these actually are converting to trial. And then once it's that makes sense. Now I'm this keyword is converting to trial.
So
that's the one I'm going to SEO.
What you're telling me is that you use ads not necessarily to figure out what should be your next blog post, but actually what should be your next product or SaaS or feature.
No, I was saying next blog post. Yeah,
next blog post too.
Yeah. So if you were,
but isn't that going to affect your CTR, because customers they click, they see the title, they like it, but then they go just to your landing page and it doesn't. Well, they don't see the blog post they're looking for.
Well, I would be running. When you run AdWords, it's going to be around your term. So for Pod Squeeze, you can go in and run ads for. We could take your
show notes, podcast show notes, for instance.
Exactly, podcast show notes, podcast content creation, podcast summary, podcast whatever. You and I could come up with 20 terms to type into Google Keyword Planner, and then Google will suggest a bunch, right? And Google will expand that using their AI, and you send them to Pod Squeeze, and you see how many people click through and sign up for a trial based on this, right? So in the ad, you don't set an expectation they're going to see a blog post. You just and then you can see which terms convert. I'm just saying it's not something everyone has to do or whatever, but it's like an interesting way. If you can scale ads up, there are really only 3 kind of infinitely scalable marketing channels, right? There's SEO, there is paid acquisition, and outbound sales. Those 3 really scale. Everything else is, like integration marketing and kind of everything else, going to in-person events. You can scale them. You just need to hire a lot of people to do them, right? And it's I got to write a bunch of code and this and that. And so if you can get one of those 3 to work, outbound, SEO, or ads, it's not easy to get those 3 to work across tiny seed companies. Again, within a few weeks, I will be invested in almost 200 B2B SaaS companies. So I see a lot of data, and it's for every 5 companies that tries to do cold outbound on LinkedIn or email, maybe 1 gets it to work, where it actually works. Ads are even less. I would say it's 1 in 10, 1 in 15. It's just hard to make the economics work. But
Mhm.
that's why you have to try a bunch of marketing approaches. I can't tell you. I can tell you what I would try in what order for Pod Squeeze, but I can't tell you what's going to work because we don't know
What
yet.
would you try for Pod Squeeze?
Well, so I have my big 5 marketing approaches, which are the most common that B2B SaaS goes after. And they're so common, I have them written down here in this notebook. These are the first 5. So it is content, SEO, cold outreach, which you probably can't afford to do with your pricing, integrations and partnerships, and ads. Those are the 5 that I would think about. Now, with ads, I would eliminate ads because I don't think you have the ACV, the annual contract value, to do it. I like content and SEO, and I do separate those things. SEO is to try to rank in a search engine. It can be Google, can be YouTube, whatever, but it's to send traffic.
So you consider YouTube to be SEO?
I consider it, if you're going after keywords. There's 2 factors in YouTube, because I have a YouTube channel with 80,000 subscribers. Some of our videos are going after SEO. They're going after searches. Most of our videos are going after recommendations, the algorithm itself. So I consider YouTube to be social media, if you want to know the truth, because it's more similar.
It's a weird mix, right?
It is. But there is some SEO. There's more SEO in YouTube than there is in Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, no one searches. Anyways, I separate content and SEO. SEO is taking advantage of search. Content, I've seen, we have a couple tiny seed companies where they do go after the SEO, but really they write an article and they want to get it to the top of Hacker News, Reddit, Quora, Stack Overflow, and it's just content, right? And eventually it might, in the end, it might result in search rankings.
It's virality,
it's a
but
viral
not
pop.
necessarily evergreen, right?
Yeah. So content and SEO can be the same thing, but you can make one work without the other. And I see it. And then I see some people just publishing a bunch of blog posts without going after the viral pop, Yeah. But so for you guys, given your relatively low ACV, content and SEO, I think, are 2 things I'd be doing. And then integration.
Tell me a little bit, sorry to interrupt, but tell me a little bit on how can someone set up a pipeline to do content? And with that, I mean, writing blog posts to trends on whatever, Reddit or Hacker News.
Reddit, Hacker News, Quora, Stack Overflow, whatever's relevant. So first of all, the question I would ask is, are there these social news sites, or are there sites where my customers are? That's the thing. For you, it's going to be podcasters, right? Or podcast producers. And so
agencies and podcasters, correct?
Agencies and podcasts. Now, do they hang out on Hacker News? I'm not sure, but they hang out on Reddit for sure. There's /podcasting/ whatever. I'm not in there, but there's at least one and maybe a handful. And so then I would go to those subreddits and I would be looking at, well, what is ranking on these? What's getting upvoted? What are the most popular things? What are the ones that people are reading? And I would start to pay homage to those. I would think about, how can I write my own take on this? If there's something that goes to the top that's about data, podcast, here is proprietary data about podcast listener analytics and how often people do blah, blah, blah. Well, I might go into PodSqueeze and say, is there any data that we can mine anonymously to produce some type of blog post or report that is some type of insight? So you have to ask yourself, can I do this? I don't copying is not what you want to do, but it's Dan Andrews calls it, what does he call it? It's
inspiration.
Rip, pivot, and jam is what he says. You rip something someone else does, you pivot it, you change it, and then you jam to build it. I mean, this is what, I like it. For MicroConf, we have the State of Independent SaaS report, right? Where we survey 600, 700, 800 SaaS founders, mostly bootstrap SaaS founders. And we put out an industry report. That's not a new idea. I saw venture capitalists doing this and I thought, why is no one doing this for bootstrappers, right? So it wasn't a new idea, but I ripped it, pivoted it to be about bootstrappers, and then we jam and we put it out every year. Similar idea. So, and that's just a content piece, right?
But how can I do that with Reddit, for instance? Because they are very, specific with spam. They don't like you going there, hey, at PodSqueeze, we do this and we do that. So, and same with Hacker News, same with Indie Hackers, all these forums, they don't normally like that you mention a brand. So how do you get trending, create great content for those platforms and still get traffic to your website?
I would look at what other people, there are people doing this right now. They're doing it. Go see what they're doing. So for me, I can tell you what I would do. And it's to create unique or surprising content, right? A surprising headline. And I would look on different subreddits have different standards, right? So I would go to that subreddit and say, is everyone else here just posting stuff that their thoughts and their insights, or are there people that are linking out? And if no one's linking out, then you don't link out. And you would take your blog post and either summarize it or put the whole thing in the Reddit post,
Without mentioning your brand.
I would mention the brand personally. And
but not linking it. You just
that I don't know. I mean, dude, I all the time. So I have like Siphon and F5 bot. I have things monitoring Reddit for my name and my book name and MicroConf and Dynasty and all the brands that I manage, right? I go into Reddit all the time and people will mention us and I'm like, hey, by the way, here's a link to my book. They mentioned my book. Yeah. Here's a link to it. Now it's a little different, right? But I post links to Reddit all the time. So I don't buy that like you can't post links to Reddit, especially if you provide a bunch of value, but you have to know the tone of the subreddit, of the users there. And there are different standards in different subreddits.
It's so interesting that you see this as a strategy, because I always thought that this was the noob move. Like you launch something and then you go spam it everywhere. But that's not a strategy that,
you don't spam it though.
Companies.
Yeah, but you don't spam it. That's the difference.
Spam is subjective, right? Some people there's always someone saying it's spam, even if and others might.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, even with Reddit, I feel that it really depends on the time of day. Sometimes you share the same post and you get tons of upvotes, and sometimes you just get tons of downvotes.
Yeah, it does. And that's marketing. Sometimes you write a bunch of blog posts and none of them rank in Google, even though you think sometimes you put together an incredible podcast and an awesome YouTube video and it gets like 50 views. And other times you throw something out there and it becomes your most popular YouTube video of all time. I've done this where it's like, really? All the hundreds of hours that I've thought about this topic and I put out this video and it gets no views. It sucks. So yeah, it's all a crapshoot. The big thing is get educated on what the standards are. And when I post anywhere, I'll weigh in on Hacker News or on Indie Hackers or on Reddit or whatever, I'm just really authentic with it and I'm genuinely out there to help people. And I do frequently mention, you'll see, if you see me post anywhere, it's like, disclosure, I'm the founder of MicroConf, but blah, blah, blah. We put together a list of the top 50 podcasts for bootstrappers. And since you asked, here it is, like I'm and I'll come in with the SaaS Playbook of like, someone asked about pricing on a SaaS subreddit, right? And I'll be like, well, here are my thoughts on I've written an entire book on this if you want it, but then I'll answer their question, paragraph, right? I still do that stuff today.
You do this yourself or you have someone in your team?
I do.
How can you have time for that? It seems such a full-time job.
Oh, it's not. No, usually I often reuse the content. That's a big thing, right? So if I post content there, I then save it and put it in my next book. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So we talked about marketing and now shifting gears a little bit towards growth. Like how should a SaaS company grow? And starting from the beginning, starting from having just a simple idea, what is to expect, right? Because I think a big mistake a lot of founders do is that they see something where there's nothing. They see one client, they see a few views or some glimpse of hope that kind of get them attached to a product for years and eventually end up killing their indie journey. So what's to expect at first when you first start a product? What's a good product? And then once you get, some growth, what's to expect with the growth of a SaaS company, Rob?
Well, what to expect is that you're going to get a bunch of muddy signals that are not going to be clear. And you're going to want to have data and make data-driven decisions, but you're not going to have enough data to be able to do that. So the early stages are so hard because they are so muddy and unclear and a lot of gut feel. And this is one of the reasons, when I wrote the SaaS Playbook, it starts at the point where you have some type of product market fit, even if it's weak product market fit, you have some customers and they're not churning out. and it takes you from there. Because from there, there's kind of a blueprint. It's not one single blueprint, but there's a lot of rules of thumb that I can say are 90% accurate, based on my experience.
Right.
When you're before that, it is muddy. You have a compass, not a map. It's like you're kind of, you know what I mean? Like you're like, well, where's north? Well, I'm kind of wandering north, trying to get somewhere. That's how it is. And so that's where I do have another book I'm working on called the SaaS Launchpad that is this early stage, right? It's idea and validation and launching and this and that. And it is a much harder book to write because I can't just tell you, oh, do this and then it will work. There is no if-then statement in the early stages. So the thing is so many people, I mean, it depends on what people are thinking when they're talking about building and launching a product. Like you said, what is a good product? Well, it's a product that solves a desperate pain point for a business. And that's what I view as a good SaaS product. And that's not necessarily what a lot of indie hackers want to hear, right? A lot of indie hackers want to do B2C. They want to do marketplaces. They want to charge self-serve $9 a month. Like, it's fine. You can build those businesses, but those are not businesses that are going to make it to $500,000 or $1 million a month. I'm sorry, $1 million a year. They just, I say not. I mean, can 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000? Of course. But in general, like those are anti-patterns for actually building a profitable and sustainable SaaS product.
And that's a huge, I guess, problem and mistake I think makers do. And I did that for sure. Because I was just watching some clips from the social network, with Facebook and Microsoft and these gigantic tech companies that grew, most of them B2C, well, not really B2C, maybe B2C to B or B2B2C. But, and we try to mimic them. We try to replicate Facebook and Instagram, which I believe to be a mistake, right? Like that's one in a million, right?
It's a different game.
So it's a completely different game. However, it's the game that we are shown, right? So let's put this into numbers. Let's say you build something, an MVP, and you release it. What are the indications that you'll take that will make you insist and say, okay, this is something. I mean, we should invest one more month.
That's good. Oh, I like that. I like that line of thinking. When do you quit? When do you persevere? Pivot or persevere, I think, is something in Lean Startup. But when do you quit and when do you persevere? So it depends on a couple things. If you have an audience, if you have people that are following you, that is usually not the best because they will tell you what you want to hear and you'll launch something to them and the signal will be like, oh, yay, this is great. Hey, look, I signed up. And you'll be like, oh, look, I got 50 signups. And then everybody doesn't wind up using it because SaaS is a tool. It's not an ebook, right? A lot of people buy an ebook from you and you're like, cool, that was the goal, was to sell the ebook or the course or whatever. But when it's a tool that is to, going to write copy for you or post AI on Twitter, post on Twitter or, do email marketing like Drip was the last one I launched. A lot of people, especially if you have an audience, you can get, I call it the curse of the audience, where you get this anti-signal. It's a signal that appears to be, it's a false positive signal, right? That appears like there's interest, but there's not. So let's kind of put that aside. I just kind of want to comment on that because a lot of people get caught up in like, oh, well, I have 5,000 Twitter followers and 50 people signed up. And so therefore that's a signal that I have a useful product. It's like, not unless you have no churn over the next 6 months, not unless you find some people. So that's the signal that I'm looking for when I build anything. And whether it's SaaS, I mean, these days I don't build SaaS, but I'm writing books and we're launching, mastermind matching and thinking about doing co-founder matching later this year through MicroConf. Even Tiny Seed was a new effort. All of these things, I'm looking for early signals, not only of people expressing interest, but of them being pretty rabid about it. Meaning, oh my God, this solves an incredible pain point for me, right? If I'm going to build SaaS, I want a few people, early adopters, to be telling me that. Even if you find, let's say you go on Product Hunt, you go on Hacker News, and you post to Reddit, you post to Core, and you post to wherever, and you're trying to get people on, and you get hundreds of signups. And only 10 people stick around, but those 10 are super rabid and they're like, this is fucking amazing. Well, who are they? What is their profile? Why is this amazing? Are they a specific role at a startup? Are they other indie hackers? I hope not, because that is actually not a great market to sell to. Are they a developer at a bigger company? Are they a manager at a bigger company that manages develop? You know what I mean? It's like you try. That's what I'm looking for. It's like, who's the core that really, really needs it? What happens most of the time is you don't get that. you get 100 people that sign up and then they kind of float in and out and nobody really cares that much about it. And you have a bunch of zombie customers that are paying you. They don't churn, but they aren't actually using it. So you not only have to look at who is signing up and who's sticking around, but who is actively using the product.
Is that the definition of product market fit? That's what you want?
To me, the definition is when I asked this question, when did you know you had product market fit? I asked this of most of the founders I interview on my podcast, Startups for the Rest of Us. And the reason is because everyone has a different definition. To me, the definition is when like all your graphs go in the right direction, like churn plummets, trial to paid escalates, visit to trial escalates. All the numbers are just like, whoa. Like I remember pointing at a graph. We had like 3 or 4 graphs to my co-founder at one point. I said, that is what product market fit looks like. It's when there's this market pull that is so strong that people, and this is, look, let's step back. Product market fit is not a binary. It's not yes or no. I think of it as a continuum, say from 1 to 100. So at weak product market fit might be a 20 on that scale. And that's probably where SaaS Playbook, starts. But you can have, like what we're talking about right now is like, that's the tilt from like, what I was just saying with graphs, like that's a tilt from weak to stronger. I mean, I think with Drip, we probably got to 60, 70% product market fit, maybe a little higher. And it was awesome. First, it was like, whoa, we're growing $2,000 a month every month. And we're doing the same marketing and the same onboarding and the same sales, but just everybody's sticking around. And then it was $5,000 a month MRR every month. And then it was $10,000 MRR. You know what I mean? That's when it's like, and we were bootstrapped, right? It's not like we had a ton of budget to do it. So that is when, that's when you know. And if I do like to think a little bit, if you have to ask if you have product market fit, you have pretty weak product market fit. And that's not a bad thing. I don't mean to insult you. That we all, we had weak or no product market fit for like 9 months after we launched. And I was supposed to know what I was doing. It's really hard. It's a lot harder to find it than most people realize.
Funny. Because when you're describing these first stages of having someone really loving your product, that's exactly what I felt with PodSquiz in comparison with other products I had. And I did a few interviews before and they explained that to me, but you only really understand it once you have it, which is they throw their passwords at you. They say like, fix it. They will stay in line until you fix the bug, right? They don't bounce. And that's what it felt like. People, like our product, we launched it and there was so many bugs, so many things that didn't work, and people would just stay with Chris online and they would like, okay, fix it. I don't care. I'll stay here. I'll share my screen. I'll share my password. I'll whatever, like fix it. And for the first time I thought, wow, like this really matters for people's lives. This is really fixing a problem. And I thought, I guess mistakenly, that would be product market fit. That's what it means. But your definition is a bit different, right? Your definition is more.
That's one signal.
There's more to that,
yeah,
right?
but what you're saying is a signal of product market fit that here's the other thing. You find product market fit with like, you can find it with a tiny, tiny audience of like, well, it's only software developers who live in Iceland between March and June and I have product market fit with them for some reason. There's only like hundreds of them. How do we get bigger, right? You may have found product market fit, a strong product market fit with just a tiny, tiny subset of people. And that that anecdote you just told is a signal. Somebody really needs.
It doesn't pay the bills.
But it does.
You need a bigger market.
Yeah. Usually you either have to find more. I mean, so it depends. It's like the market might be big enough, but you're just not marketing well. Let's say there's 100,000 people like that one you just shared. Well, where are they? Why are you not getting in front of them? How are you not getting more to your website? That's where like it's hard.
And you are touching a very interesting point there, which is size of the market. And you can search for it. You can like search for podcasting market size, and they'll be like, it's, I don't even know, like 2 billion. How do they come up with this? What does that mean? Numbers.
Here's what I want to know. I don't give a shit about the size, the dollar value. What I care about is how many businesses or individuals, if you're selling to individuals, but I discourage people from doing that, but how many businesses are in the space that could feasibly want this solution? That's what I want to know. And then I'm going to look at my pricing and say, well, what's my average revenue per customer, revenue per account, right? That's the multiplier I
Right.
want. So we have funded, I'm almost up to 200 companies I'm invested in. And we have funded companies where literally the entire known market is 1,500 businesses. Very, very small. But they charge, their average revenue per account is, I forget what it is, let's say $500-$600 per month. And they do one call closes, right? So that's meaning it's, they do a demo and they close them. So you're talking, what is that, $6,000 a year? And you can start doing some math where it's like, oh, that's not a terrible business. Now, will they get to 5 million ARR on that? No, they won't. And they know that. So what they're doing is they're looking at what adjacent verticals can they branch into, or what other services can they add, or other modules of software that they can charge more for to get the average revenue up, right? But then there are obviously, we've invested in Castos and Squadcast, which are podcast apps. And are there hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of potential customers? Yeah, it's some number in there. It's a lot. But the average revenue, I know specifically I don't know the average revenue, sorry, but like the lowest price plan on Castos is like $19 a month. So the math is very different there because there's a lot more, but it's a lot lower purchase price per customer.
And in those calculations, do you consider that you might get to 100% of your paying market? Or do you just give it like, what is the percentage you would consider?
I don't know. That's I like to think of like there's TAM, which is what venture capitalists say, total addressable market. At numbers, I'd never listen to that. But I like this thing that I made up called TRM, total reachable market. And I like to think about how many can I feasibly reach given the marketing chops and the budget and all that I have. How many can I reach in a year total or in a month total? Meaning, as I'm doing SEO efforts, I'm getting 1,000 uniques a month. Well, my total reachable market right now is it's 1,000 at best, right? At best. And those are probably some duplicates and some unqualified traffic. So that's how I think about growth, is how many, and I'm going to add more channels to try to get more people in. If we're talking about total market size though, look, if you have 1,500 potential in the market, can I imagine you getting 20%, 50% of that market? Yeah, maybe at some point. If you're doing podcasting, would you ever get 20%?
You need to do those calculations. You need to do those calculations before investing, right? You need to say like, okay, what's the minimum they need to reach, like for me to consider investing, and does that make sense?
But we never do. Here's the thing: the dirty secret of all of this is so much of it is pattern matching and mental models and approximation. Like when we interviewed them, 1,500 potential customers, I said, wow, that's a small market. I see your average revenue per account is this. Even if you took the whole market, it's $600 a month times 15. It's just not that big of a business. So that's all I said. I didn't say exactly, I think you'll get to this before you plateau. I didn't go that detailed. I didn't do exact math, but I was like, gut feel is that's not a lot of people. So how are you thinking about what happens when you plateau and you've hit the top of your market? Basically, you have everybody that you can kind of get to switch. They said, we're going to look at other verticals. They had an answer for it. That's what happened there. Does that make sense? So if you have, I mean, like the total number of SaaS companies in the world, let's exclude like super early stage indie hacker projects that are, let's not count, but like actual SaaS companies that maybe would have an account at Profitwell or, Baremetrics or what is it? ChartMogul, like one of those big three that are like, legitimate companies maybe doing at least a few thousand a month in MRR. Do you have any idea what that number is? How many there are?
I have no idea.
It's estimated that it's about 40,000 or 50,000 in the world. It's not a lot, is it? It sounds small. No.
It's not a lot.
And yet,
consider them.
Profitwell, which is, metrics for subscription companies, they built their company to 8 figures in ARR, and they sold it for $200 million. Yeah. So would you say, whoa, crazy. Small market? No.
It's based on what they charge.
Based on how you take advantage of it. There's value. So is a 50,000, 1,500 is a small market. You could still build a great lifestyle business for sure. Like, Tiny Seed needs to have a 7-figure ARR, company in order for us to be able to invest. But if those guys hadn't taken funding, they still could have built, a good business in a 1,500 person market.
Let me throw another term to the mix. Escape velocity. What is that?
Yeah.
How can we reach it?
I like this. So the reason that I coined, I mean, escape velocity is obviously a term for getting into space and stuff, and other people have used it in startups. But what I found was people would say, "Oh, I have product market fit," and it's like, okay, what does that mean exactly? And some people would use it to mean, "Oh, I built a product that people really, businesses really want and are willing to pay for, but I don't have any marketing channels in place, and I'm not actually growing." Or I'm growing very slowly because there's no inbound interest, right? I'm not generating. So I threw escape velocity in of, you have both of those. You have a product that people really want. Churn is extremely low. You can close deals. It's not that you have this big flywheel, but you at least have enough in place that it's working. And you have found one or more marketing channels or growth channels that are bringing new people in, and you're seeing growth every month. I feel like with bootstrappers, look, venture capitalists will often say you don't have any product market fit until you're at 1 million ARR, $1 million a year. And I'm like, bootstrapping, I think you have a decent amount of product market fit, usually at about 10K MRR, 15K MRR. Escape velocity usually starts to happen in that, let's say 10 to 30K MRR, where things start working in a repeatable fashion and people are sticking around.
And the idea is that the business kind of takes off and you just keep doing the same things, but you keep having more and more, right?
Kind of. Every business plateaus at some point, and some businesses plateau at 40K, 20 to 30K MRR. Laura Roeder just tweeted that like there's a bunch of SaaS that you've heard of that are stuck around that 20 to 30, and I would say 20 to 50K MRR is a pretty common place to get plateaued. But then there are some that plateau.
Interesting as well. Also, it's really interesting that there's like a commonality. Like it's common that a lot of bootstrap business, plateau in those numbers. Do you have any theory
it's
on
because
that?
You build something people want and you find a single marketing channel and that tops out. And that's it. And then folks who plateau there don't expand their product market fit to other people, to other ICPs, ideal customer profiles, or they don't add more marketing flywheels. They don't add more marketing channels, either because they don't know how, because they got a little lucky getting there and they don't know how to do it again, or some people just don't want to put in the work, or sometimes it's just really hard. It is hard to know, how do I expand? Oftentimes too, if you've gotten to 20 to 50K in a big market, there's usually a few other entrenched competitors that are just sucking the air out of the market, and they're hard to compete with because they're big, they're the main brand name, and they have a lot of funding.
Let's talk a little bit about teams. When shall I start growing a team, hiring people? What should be the stage that I should consider that?
It depends on your goals. Like if you want to grow quickly, then you need to hire as soon as you can, because having more people helps you grow faster. If you're more in the lifestyle camp of like, I'm going to take it as it goes, I'm going to be more organic, then you kind of hold off as long as you can, because you're probably trying to take profits out of the business, right? I've run businesses both ways. I'll call it being a lifestyle bootstrapper and an ambitious bootstrapper. Those are the terms I use. I've had both. I had a lifestyle business it was called Hittail, doing 30 grand a month with like 3,000 in expenses. It was a bunch of contractors and me. And I had to do a bunch of stuff, but like that one changed my life in terms of income. And then ambitious is more like, the ones, and you don't even need to, it's not even, you need to raise funding, but just think of any tiny seed company or any folks who want to get to the 1, 3, 5 million bootstrapping. Like that doesn't happen by accident. You have to be pretty deliberate about that. And so if you're in that ambitious camp, you start hiring as soon as you can, because that'll get you there faster. And I actually have recommendations. I'm trying to think if it's in the SaaS Playbook, or this is one of those things where it's like the moment that it goes to press, I think of another thing of like, ooh, that's a really good idea. And I did a talk at MicroConf last year with a chart that says if you're in a low touch versus a high touch, meaning you have a lot of sales effort versus not, and what your founder's skill sets are. So if you're a developer and you're in a low touch funnel, right? Marketing funnel, usually your first hire is a support person, because you have a lot of people coming in to support. But if you're a developer in high touch where sales is happening, usually you're doing the sales, and the first person you need to hire is customer success. So I have this whole it's like a flow chart that says
Yeah, you
Do
have
I?
that
Good.
in the book.
I'm glad I
True.
included
Yeah.
it. I
Mhm.
I forget. So it's like
Yeah.
9, and I talk about it. It's 90% accurate. It's not 100%. I ran through a
Mhm.
bunch of tiny seed companies and had them say, yes, that worked, and I did this.
Right. I mean, I think most independently if you own a lifestyle business or not, I would say everyone would like to make more money, right? Even if that's not their main priority, if you offer that to them, they'll be like, sure. I mean, why not? The question to me is that a team should be in investment to get there. And for me, we started hiring freelancers and not full time yet, but because I thought that my time would be much well invested in other tasks like coding, for instance. I'm a developer, but other people can code. It's easy, right? And not other people can maybe interview my customers. So it makes more sense for me to understand what my customers need and focus on that. Whereas like I give those coding tasks to someone else. So for me, that would be an investment, right? Like getting a team is an investment to get more, eventually, more money. Is that always the case, or can it be that sometimes you actually don't need a team because that don't matter that much?
So first off, what you're saying, I like what you're saying. I'm thinking I'm a developer, and the easiest thing to get done is for me to manage somebody to write code so that I have time to do the more founder focused things, the areas of uncertainty or of risk, right? That's what you're talking about. So yes, I fully endorse that, and I'm glad you're doing it. It's an anti-pattern for developers to want to keep developing and then when I'm going to hire sales and I'm going to hire someone to do all this other stuff, but that other stuff is all amorphous and it takes a founder mindset, right? It takes founder thinking to get
Yeah,
there.
totally. I think you mentioned that also in the book that if I'm coding, I cannot focus on other, because coding, you need to get in this state of mind. And I think only developers will understand this. It just sucks all of your attention. Like you're sleeping, you're thinking about it. You're taking a shower thinking about that problem that you need to fix. And that's incompatible with, thinking long term and strategizing, right? So that's also, I think you mentioned that in the book, and I resonate with that totally.
Yep. And so your question was, is that always the case that you need to hire a team? And
yeah,
I'm trying to think. My answer is a tentative yes. I hate saying always because it's like, is there an exception? Well, of course there is. Can you, if you're willing to grow a little slower, can you just never hire anyone? Maybe. Depends on the business. Most SaaS businesses, you need people because there's just so many moving parts. You need to maintain the code. You need to, have somebody support. It depends on what your business is, but there's almost always a need for additional humans unless you just want to spend your day to day doing the same stuff over and over. I don't want to do that. I don't want. That's the big thing, right? Is like keeping your life interesting, your work interesting. It gets really boring if you keep doing the same stuff. So in almost every case, certainly the SaaS companies I work with, not even through Tiny Seed alone, but just on the podcast or on MicroConf, pretty much everyone hires, even if they might hire part-time contractors, they might hire, freelancers, they might hire W-2, but it's kind of an inevitability unless you make the overt decision, I want to not decrease my growth. I'm willing to sacrifice growth because I don't want to deal with the headache of hiring and managing people. Then you can make that choice. It's not a choice I would make because I want to make more money, but it's a choice.
Totally. Yeah. Is it hard managing people, or does it always need to be hard managing?
It doesn't
people?
always need to be hard. Over time, it is hard, and it's hard to learn up front, right? If you've had the luxury of having a day job where you have managed people, that's a great skill to have. If you've never done it, learning how to delegate, how to check on people's work without, feeling like, oh, well, if I check on their work, I may as well just do it myself. You hear that and it's like, that's not actually true. That's not actually true.
Yeah.
If they wrote 8 hours of code and it takes you 30 minutes or 45 minutes to review it or whatever, and that feels like a lot, but it's like, come on, that's not, I hear developers and other folks say that all the time. Might as well just do it myself. It's like, that's almost never true. The hard part, well, there's two hard parts. So I think of people that you work with on your team in three levels, right? There's task level thinkers, project level thinkers, and owner or founder level thinkers. Task level thinkers is like they need the next task. This is like a support person or an executive assistant where it's like, what do I do next? What do I do next? It's like you have to keep them busy. You feed them.
Mhm.
And if you give them a big project, they can't manage it. It's like too complicated. Usually these are more junior people early in their career. Project level are when you say, hey, there's this whole project to update a bunch of SEO things and maybe try to get a little marketing, blah, blah, blah. They can manage multiple conflicting priorities and they keep it all together, right? They're type A enough to do it. And then owner or founder level thinkers are the ones that are doing these highly risky, very amorphous, making hard decisions with incomplete information and pushing stuff forward. So the problem is usually if your budget's low, you can't afford to hire that top tier. You hire either task level or you get lucky and maybe hire a project level thinker. And so you have to then be that higher level thinker for them. So if you have a bunch of task level people, I had 9 contractors at one point. I was solo and I had about a dozen small software products and I needed a bunch of stuff done, right? I needed some code written. I needed some support done. I needed design and marketing and all this stuff. So I had all these contractors. Well, they were all task level. So I was now the bottleneck and the project level thinker at the top. And so when you say, is it hard? It can get, there can be a lot if you have to manage all that. Now, I know some founders who make enough money that then they hire a project manager to be that, the traffic light. And then they're allowed to do, or, are able to do the founder level stuff. It's hard when someone quits and you're relying on them. It's hard when they move on because then it's like, I got to replace them and it's so much time, right? So there are pros and cons to it.
I totally relate to that. I totally relate with what you just mentioned, task type of people and
project and owner.
Project and owners. Makes a lot of sense. We always try to find someone that they are there to save me time and not the opposite, right? So if I need to constantly give tasks, so the idea is like, okay, you start by giving tasks, but hopefully, and from the start, when we hire someone, it's like, hey, we will give you a lot of responsibility and we'll trust you. And we'll obviously review that with you, but that's the goal. The goal is not always to just keep giving you tasks. The interesting thing now, and entering a little bit in the field of VC versus bootstrap, is especially if you hire a developer and they ask you, sure, I need a salary of 100K, and you're like, 100K, it's an absurd number if you're a bootstrap founder. Like even 50K is an absurd number because you start thinking, okay, sure, I make 100K, 150K, that's what I make in a year, right? Like how can one person ask for that money? How can companies hire 300 of those and 500 of those? And that's something that I'm trying to wrap my head around it. My conclusion at the moment, I would love to hear your thoughts, is that it's just a different world. And like VCs, they work with debt, right? They are shifting debt, so they are willing to. They have that money, even that money doesn't exist really. So my question is that true? Do you think that's how come some companies can pay so much? And how can bootstrapped smaller companies go around that?
Yes, that's true. They can pay so much because they either raise a lot of money or they are extremely profitable, let's say, or throw off a lot of cash. Think of Stripe, Facebook, Google. In the early days, they raised funding, but then, they actually make tremendous amounts of money these days. So they can just afford to pay whatever for the highest quality people. What you do as a bootstrapper is what we've always done, which is be scrappy and zig when the big competitors are zagging. So the advantage we've always had, one advantage that bootstrappers have always had, is we have always, in almost all cases, done remote work. COVID kind of screwed us on this because before this, I could hire amazing engineers who didn't want to go into an office for a lot less money than they would get if they worked for Facebook or Google, but they didn't want to live in the Bay Area and they want to drive in. That is still the case, just not as much. Yeah. So remote. So if you look at any job posting I've ever listed, one of the things that I call out is you're going to have a huge impact on the product. You're going to work on a small team, and you are going to be fully remote and in charge of your own schedule. And so that has always been, a pretty neat thing.
You give them other perks.
Yeah. You have to figure out what is it that you can actually offer. The second thing is, when I started hiring, the first folks I hired in 2007, virtual assistants, it's like I hired in the Philippines. Time zone's a bit of a, a bit of a challenge because I'm in the US, but I could hire them for $5 an hour and they could make, that was a living for them, right? That was a living wage. It's a little more than that now, but realistically these days, let's just say you're in the US time zones. You can hire in the US where it's more expensive, but you could also go, you can hire someone kind of out in the middle of nowhere in the US. You can hire someone who lives in Arkansas where the cost of living is lower, right? You can hire someone in Canada, same time zones, but it's what, 20, 30% less expensive in terms of salaries. You can hire in South America. We have a bunch of tiny seed companies that are hiring in Central and South America, and you get these really good developers that are half the cost. So that's what you have to do. You have to be just a little more creative with it. And you're right, it is a different world.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's what we did. We have people from Nigeria, India, Madagascar, which is also quite fun, to be honest. I have people, sometimes I just ask them, hey, take a picture of your window. I want to see like, what are you able to see? And I'll share mine. And it's so fun, but absolutely. And it's also interesting what you just mentioned. That's true. COVID screwed us because of that as well. Now, other companies are doing the same because they realize it's basically the same. They can also still be productive. Now, one thing that I want to cover here is one book that you mentioned in your book, the SaaS Playbook, is the 4 hours work week by Tim Ferriss. And there's one concept I really like, which is working on side of the business instead of working on top of the business. Now, my question to you is, first of all, is this bullshit talk? Is like, can you actually do this? Can you have like successful business and working on the side? Because it seemed too easy to be true. And if so, how can one accomplish that?
So when you say it's working on the business versus in the business, is that what you're thinking? Where it's like when you're in the business?
No.
What do you mean on the side?
Just like working on, like being on top, right? So as you grow a business, you become the boss kind of, and you're on top of the business. And the idea that he mentions in the book is like, just be on the side. Your goal is to be like, they don't need you.
Yeah.
Like you need to strive for, you can be on vacation and the business is running and they don't need to come to you for questions and answers.
Yeah, so it's removing yourself from the day-to-day operations, that nothing in the operation of the business relies on you to actually do it. Now you can advise, but you don't actually have to do it. Yes, you can do this. You can't do it, or you shouldn't do it, when there's still big levels of uncertainty or risk in the business. So that's early stage, that's trying to find product market fit, that's, we don't have a repeatable channel. Once things are repeatable and you can document them in a Notion doc or Trello board or whatever it is you're going to document them, and you can bring other humans in to just do processes to make it work, then yes, you can step to the side of the business. Most SaaS companies don't get there. They either shut down or they sell before you autopilot them. If you there's a couple things. So Tim Ferriss is, he had a supplements business, e-com business. So once you've designed it and you have a marketing channel, what are you selling it on Amazon or AdWords and they're working, like you hire a few people to fulfill, that's it, right? So he's talking about a much simpler business than a SaaS company. But I will say, like MicroConf and Tiny Seed, they're fairly complicated businesses, a lot of moving parts, 125,000 like audience, like there's a lot of things going out, a lot of YouTube videos, podcasts, and all that. I don't work in the business very much. We have folks who run the operations day to day of those two companies. And in terms of operating the businesses, I advise them. I'll do an hour call once a week and say, oh, what are your questions? Oh yeah, do this, do that. Now, I'm still tied in. There's a different thing. I'm tied in as the face of the business. So I do have to record YouTube videos and podcasts, and I write my books and stuff. But imagine that like it was a business that it wasn't an audience-based business. Then I would not do very much, if you want to know the truth.
So you only have meetings. How many meetings? How many hours you work per week?
So
on those business?
I'm advising founders in a way that I can't outsource, right? I can't, they want to talk to me. So like we've invested in Tiny Seed founders and I'm doing 5 to 7 hours a week of calls with them. So I'm not working in the business, but that is part of what I do, right? The actual operating and day-to-day of it, it's literally a couple hours a week, 2-4 hours a week that I'll do a long call with, with operations people and just be like, all right, well, what's the problem? What's changing? What needs to change? What's happening next? But everything else is just, it runs. And so if you're thinking about a SaaS company, usually SaaS is growing, and things are just changing constantly, right? It's like, oh shit, that marketing approach doesn't work anymore. How do we get more sales? And all that requires founder attention. I don't know of a bootstrap founder who's just brought in some CEO or general manager. who can do
Right.
that because shit changes so
And
quickly.
yeah.
Does that make sense? So yes, can you get to the point where you're not running the operations day to
Totally.
day? Of course. Hire a director of
No,
operations.
I mean, I not totally. Just like I don't believe in fully passive income, obviously, and and what I'm saying here, and what I'm reading from this, that you still need to work if you even, but the idea is that you work less. You remove a little bit of, you give the responsibility away, and you are only the crucial thing. You are still there. You still love the business, hopefully, so you're still in the industry, understanding what needs to be done. But yeah, you are on the side. Maybe you only need 4 hours a week, or like the book says. What's the rest? If that's possible, what's the recipe? Like, what's the structure to get there? Either with a SaaS or what we did with Tiny Seeds. Like, what should be the mentality to get there?
It is. I mean, so I did it. I worked 12 hours a week for almost a year back in 2010, 2011. I made $150,000 a year purely from products. There were 2 SaaS companies. There was 1 downloadable software. There were several ebooks. And then there was kind of courses and stuff I was on. So it was just, I barely worked. I had a young kid. It was our second kid. And I just hung out with him. And it was great. So it's totally possible. Nice. And then, as I said, I'm mostly doing that today with MicroConf Tiny Seed. One advantage I have with MicroConf and Tiny Seed is I have budget now to hire senior people. And so if you have that, and you are paying, you talked about crazy US salaries. It's like, that's what we pay that because I need owner level thinkers in both of those. And so I can give them some advice and they go execute, right? If you don't have that, you can still do it. The mindset of it is any area of certainty, any area that you can be like, oh, this is now just a repeatable thing. Like usually it's like support is an early one with a SaaS company of like, I'm getting kind of the same 10 questions every day, every week. Hiring that, putting it in a knowledge base and just having someone handle 95% of their support requests and only escalating to you when they come through. Like that's a form of automation, right? It's human automation. And if you hire a support person, can that support person also be writing knowledge base documents and maybe be handling live chat and email and maybe do some customer success for you and do onboarding? You know what I mean? You kind of, all of that becomes predictable. Now, the first time you do customer success and you onboard someone and you walk them through, that's hard. It's uncertain. Like, I don't know, how do we do this? What are people going to stumble on? You don't know what you don't know yet. But you as the founder, you do that 10 times, you do that 20 times. Suddenly you're like, I pretty much have a checklist. I know exactly the questions they're going to, right? I mean, for the most part. So that's the point where you're like, now bring someone in, and whether it's someone on your team already who can take it over, or whether you're going out to hire someone, you're trying to think of what areas of certainty or repetition or process, and then you bring someone in for that. And that's where development, it's hard to outsource or to like bring someone in to run product, meaning make the decisions of what do we build next and in what order, how should it function, all that stuff. That's hard. It's expensive. Right? I don't know anybody who's cheap that can do that. That's where the founder usually does that for a long time, till about $1 million ARR. But development, as you know, you can hire a developer to write some code because it is just a language that you speak, right? So that it is easier to offload from your plate. It's an area of relative certainty. So that's what I think about is certainty versus uncertainty.
Yeah, and it's the whole journey, I think, of an entrepreneur. Like it's also that mindset, right? As you're saying, not a lot of developers work that way, of like hiring another developer, but I'm trying to like be more, entrepreneur and not so much a developer, like entrepreneur with developer background. And those are the little things I guess you start learning, and you be like, okay, I'm doing this every day now, but it's always the same. There's a script. I can just, automate this and focus on other things. Now, the question is that the recipe to get rich? Like, how does one get rich? Is that with one company? I guess no one gets rich mostly by just like coding. What's the recipe? How can get someone getting rich? And what with rich, I mean enough for you to cover like the lifestyle you want. Like, let's imagine someone that wants, to travel without thinking too much about how much they are going to spend. I'm not saying crazy, having a private jet, but enough so that you can live a nice, comfortable life and you don't have to check the prices all the time.
Do you mean rich in income or rich in assets? Because there's a difference, right? Let's say I have a SaaS app that is just me, and it's on, and a support person, and it just runs itself. That doesn't exist, but let's say it did, and I'm making 150,000 a year, 200,000 US a year, just traveling. Would you say they're rich?
Mm-hmm.
If they're rich for now, I've had that situation. Actually, Hittail was doing 350,000 a year. The problem is there is no autopilot income and there's no forever income in SaaS. And so what you find is shit starts breaking, competitors come in, Google slaps you, things happen about every 12 to 18 months. Your business will get turned upside down, so to speak. And anything you have on autopilot, in quotes, will not last and it will start to decline. So you're rich for now. Let's say you had 200,000 that first year. That's
so that's not what I want.
You want money in the bank. You want like
mind.
$5 million in the bank, cash, right? Or 4 million, or some number,
right? Or a kind of business that gives some kind of predictability, and I know that those things won't happen. That in one day from the other you won't die. I know that it's impossible to find something.
I don't know
but
of a business like
at least
that.
To lower the chance of that.
So let's just talk about a bunch of cash in the bank. So the people that I know, I actually just recorded just went live a couple days ago, called The 7 Greatest Investments of My Life. And it's in order from 1 to 7 it's in the order of how much money they made me in my life. And number 1 is selling software companies. It's exiting. And number 2 is crypto, which I happen to invest in early. And number 3 was angel investing. And number 4 was operating profitable companies. That was my list. And then it went from there. 5th was like salaried employment, I think. I don't actually remember what the others were, but it's an episode. I walked through it. Now, most of the people I know who have $5 million in the bank and up sold something. There are some people that operate. There are exceptions to this. There's a guy named Matt Paulson who runs MarketBeat, and he's public. I think he's public about their revenue. It does like 25 million a year, and he has 10 employees. So it's basically like, I don't know what his margin. He's got to be making 20 million a year, if a penny, right? So there are exceptions. The vast majority of folks I know wind up selling something, selling an asset. And in our case, we're entrepreneurs, so usually it's selling a business. I'm not saying you have to sell, but you'll notice most people sell eventually. Everyone sells eventually. Yeah. And the interesting part is, depending on where you live in the world, like in the US, your tax treatment is so much more beneficial if you sell an asset than if you get income, right? I mean, it can be 2 to 3 times the amount of tax on your income. The second thing is, if you sell a SaaS company, let's say you're operating a SaaS company, run some numbers real quick. You're operating a SaaS company doing $2 million a year top line ARR. Let's say you're pretty good profit margin and you're making $500,000 net profit a year into your bank account. You're then paying 50% of that in tax if you're in the US, so you're walking away with $250,000 in cash. Hey, that's great. That's a great lifestyle business. If that business is growing at all, pretty good chance you can sell it for $10 million. Okay. So if we run some loose math, and you pay half the tax on it, right? Or less. So $10 million in cash to you.
So you get like 8 million in the bank.
You get, somewhere around that. It depends on what state you live in. Because if you live in California or, where there's 10%. But yes, you're right, 7 or 8 million. But even let's just say
like 10 years, more than 10 years.
Well,
like getting
more than 10 years. I mean, 250,000 is like more, 30 times. It's 30 years, right? Or if let's just forget taxes and just say 10 million versus 500,000, that's 20 times. Let's say you have a $2 million app doing $1 million a year in profit, which would be possible, pretty tough though. Even then, it's 10 years. You accelerate 10 years of earnings by selling. So am I saying everyone should sell? Am I saying you should sell? I'm not. But am I saying that the rich people, the rich entrepreneurs I know got rich by selling 90+%? And that's the same thing for me.
So then you sell, and then what? Like, because it's funny. It's a conversation I have with my co-founder many times. I mean, we are putting so much effort into like growing, and it's so much fun, right? Like, so there's the benefits to it. Like, it's fun, and we learn a lot. But we can sell and put that money in like ETFs and whatever, maybe even getting a flat or.
And then what?
Yeah, what is preventing it? Yeah, and then what? Exactly. Like, do you start something? Is that easy?
What you want to do? You know what? Then what? You do whatever the fuck you want to do for the rest of your life. That's what you do, because you've earned it, because you have $5 million in the bank, or 3, or whatever the number is, and you can now work on whatever you want. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur for freedom. freedom. And money gives you freedom. Money in the bank gives that to you. And I
Mhm.
will never forget the day that I saw the wire come through from exiting Drip, because that was the moment. Before then, I was building wealth. I mean, I was fine. I was selling, I had these companies and all that. But the moment that I looked and I said, whoa, I never have to work again, was the day that wire came through. And it
Mhm.
absolutely changed the way I think about it. Now, for the most part, I only do and work on things that I really care about and I really want to do. So some folks I know
Mhm.
start another SaaS company. Some folks start investing and advising. Some folks start writing books. Some folks, usually you should take 6 months off, would be my advice, and just let it sit.
Mhm.
Let there be. Usually you'll start registering domains right away and start thinking about the next thing. So I don't know, man. We're
Yeah,
entrepreneurs.
that's
You're
actually
creative.
funny that
Yeah.
we reach here because that's one of the last topics I want to chat about, which is
Mm,
happiness. And as an entrepreneur, myself and you as well, we started to and you much more than I did or did do. We start to cross, boxes and reaching things that we never thought it was possible. Starting a business that makes money, it's already a big one. Wow, amazing. People coming to you and thanking you for changing their lives with the business you create, amazing. Making tons of money, amazing. Now, is that enough to bring you happiness? Like, what is happiness? What makes you, wake up in the morning and have fun? And I know that you do founder retreats. You mentioned that
sure.
as well in the book, which is something that is very interesting. So first of all, yeah, I know happiness is not something that one can just achieve and be happy forever. It's always there,
Yep.
and that's, I guess, why those retreats matter. What's happiness for you? How do you maintain it?
Yeah, I used to think that I could find it and have it permanently. And there's a thing called the arrival fallacy. It's the fallacy that you think you're going to get to the point, I've arrived and it's all
Yeah,
gravy. And I thought, man, if I just had a SaaS app doing 10 grand a month, then I've arrived. I'll be happy forever. Turns out you get there, you're like, nope. And then it's like, well, what if it did like 30 grand a month and I was actually kind of wealthy? That's great. It levels you up and you're happy for about a month and then you figure it out. So for me, I realized early on, I thought it was just about freedom. If I was free to work on whatever I want, if I had enough income or money in the bank, that once I'm free, it'll be amazing. And back to the point I said earlier, where I took that year and I only worked about 12 hours a week, I was pretty much free to do whatever the hell I wanted all the time. And it was great until I got really bored. I got about 8 months
yeah,
into that. I was so bored and I was like, I got to do something more ambitious. I actually was listening to a lot of audiobooks and I got really upset listening to startup stories and the story of Warren Buffett,
yeah.
because I was like, I'm not doing anything interesting. I'm not helping people. I'm not challenging myself. I was really bored. So I realized there was a second piece to this. And I had heard this on a podcast 15 years ago, whatever, but freedom, I do think is happiness for most people. Purpose is the
Mhm.
second thing. You need a purpose, something that is interesting to you. And some people working on a nonprofit or travel or having good friends and family, that's purpose. For me, my purpose is I need to be constantly learning, constantly challenged, constantly shipping things into the world that other people see. There's a reason I ship 52 YouTube videos a year, 104 podcast episodes. I'm on the pace to do a book a year for the next 3 years. It's
Mhm.
like, because that's actually what my purpose is, right? So freedom, purpose, and then relationships are the third thing. I think most of us, almost without exception, need other people in our lives. This may be friends, this may be family.
Mhm.
I had times in my life where I had a lot of freedom and I did not have much purpose and I had kind of torched my relationships and I was very, very unhappy. So for me, the
Mhm.
ticket is those three: freedom, purpose, and relationship. I think that's probably, if you are listening to this and you don't have any other guiding principles, start with that one and then see if it works. Some people can say,
Yeah,
I don't need any relationships, and maybe you're built that way, but I believe that those three things are what we, should be
yeah.
seeking.
And to be honest, having purpose and doing a business kind of goes against of having
A little
relationships a
bit.
little
It
bit,
does.
right?
Yep.
Uh, so it's the finding, and that's what I'm trying as well. Like finding the line that balance it all is not easy,
No,
right?
and you'll go in and out of balance. I mean, that means, so right now you have freedom to work on what you want. For the most part, you're working on your own business, but I bet
Yeah,
there's still things in your day that you're like, I don't want to do this. So you don't have full freedom yet, right?
yeah,
Maybe if you sell for
totally.
10 million, you will at some point. Purpose you have, I bet, because you're like stoked to work constantly. So that purpose is the easy part
Yeah,
right now, given what you're doing. Relationships is the one that you're going to have to actively force yourself to do, whether you're in a, whether you have a spouse or a significant other, or whether it's just friendships and keeping that, and family and keeping that and deepening them. Those are the things that go by the wayside. You go in and out of balance with these things. And it's like, if you were to exit your company, you now have freedom. Let's say, again, you sold for 10 million and you now have freedom and you now have tons of time for relationships, but you're going to lose purpose and you're going to have to reorient, right? And then if you find that, the next one, hopefully you'll do like I did, which is, I have the freedom now. So I'm only going to work on things I really enjoy with people I really want to work with. My purpose is to multiply the world's population of independent, self-sustaining startups, right? And I can, everything I do with this Tiny Seed, MicroConf, the books, whatever, this podcast interview, like it all feeds to that. And then relationships, since I have the freedom to work as much or as little as I want, I do invest quite a bit of time into my relationships now because I have the means and I have the luxury. I worked hard to get that. And so in your shoes, I was in your shoes too. And it's harder where you are to prioritize relationships when it does feel like I just want to grow my company.
Yeah, totally. And those retreats that you do, is that something that you still do, that you like take some time to think and like, hey, like once checking in with yourself?
Yeah, once a year I try to take 2 nights because I have wife and 2 kids. And so, it can be noisy around the house and stuff. I try to get away for 2 nights. And during that time, I don't consume any podcasts, any audiobooks, like no information. I just want music or silence. And I do make a bunch of notes. And I ask myself a bunch of questions. My wife, I mentioned it in the book, but my wife, Dr. Sherry Wallen, she's a psychologist.
She was the one that introduced it to you.
She introduced it to it. And she has this great ebook called The Zen Founder Guide to Founder Retreats. And it's, I don't know, it's like $20 on Gumroad, but it's like a bunch of it's what I use as my guide. And some years it's amazing revelations of like, oh my gosh, I need to stop doing all this stuff and do a complete life pivot, probably sell my company, start something new. In other years, it's like refinement. It's like, I'm going to keep doing MicroConf, Tiny Seed. I'm going to ship another book, but like, at least I have some awareness of like, there's probably things at my day job I shouldn't be doing. Excuse me. Maybe I need to hire it out, So I really enjoy them. We don't give ourselves enough time as entrepreneurs to have a little bit of insight,
And as people in general, not only entrepreneurs, I think it's very often we just get into these autopilots and then suddenly, bam, we're old. Rob, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure and I've learned a lot. I think we have a lot of information. Tell us again, where can we find you? Wherever you like, your book, your podcast, and as well, what other entrepreneurs do you follow? What other books do you recommend? I love your recommendations. I read almost all of them, so I need more. So where's your stuff? Where's other stuff that we should look at?
My stuff, SaaSPlaybook.com, if you want to learn about the book. If you're listening to this podcast, you might like my podcast, Startups for the Rest of Us, as well as a YouTube channel, microconf.com/YouTube. For book recommendations, man, it's in the back of the SaaS Playbook is kind of my top SaaS and business. There is I
only have the audio version.
Oh, okay. Oh, but you have there's a PDF accompanying it. If you go to Audible, there'll be, we have with all the PDF comes with all the diagrams and it comes with the appendix because the appendix is all my recommendations.
Okay.
If you've already read all those, I would honestly, you know what? There's a really good thread. Go to Twitter. And it was a month ago, I said, I'm all out of nonfiction books. I'm willing to do business books, but even like biographies, anything nonfiction. And there's probably 100, 200 suggestions there. I was like, ooh, these are pretty cool. So I've started listening through some of those. That could be a source to go for recommendations. Because these are definitely my best ones are at the back of SaaS Playbook. I put a lot of thought into those.
Perfect. Everything will also be linked in the show notes of this episode. Rob, once again, thank you so much for coming on the Wannabe Entrepreneur Show.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.
Hey, that's the wrap of today's interview. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are a first-time listener, this is the Wannabe Entrepreneur podcast, the podcast about what's really like to bootstrap a company. My name is Tiago, and I am the host. I share my own journey as an entrepreneur, and I interview other makers. I have a lot of interviews in the backlog that you can just go and check it out. You can go to wannabe-entrepreneur.com/podcast, or the links will be in the show notes. If you like this episode, make sure to share it with all of your indie maker friends and leave it in a review on Spotify or Apple Reviews. This was another Wannabe Entrepreneur. See you next time.